Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's with a very cool Colt commercial interwar machine gun. This is an MG38, which does not mean it was adopted by any military in 1938. Actually, that was the name given to this system in 1931 by Colt. So the backstory here is, of course, there were several companies manufacturing Browning machine guns for the United States military during World War I, but Colt was the company that actually owned the rights to Browning's patents. So when the war was over, some of the other companies like Westinghouse shut down their production. They had, they finished off their military contracts. And as of 1919, there was only one company that actually had the legal right to manufacture Browning machine guns. Not relevant, like for today's purposes, we're just talking about the water-cooled belt-fed here, but this also applied to the BAR, for example, and the 50 caliber machine guns. But at any rate, Colt has all of this production capacity. They have a fantastic, very reliable, very good gun, and they want to start selling it. So in 1919, they put it into their commercial catalog as the model of 1919 machine gun. And they start looking for international sales. And these are primarily militaries in other countries that they're looking at, countries that don't have domestic machine gun manufacturing capacity of their own. And in fact, interestingly, a lot of Colt's interwar sales were for aircraft use. You'll see, if you look at their ledgers, you see a lot of entries to things like the Curtiss-Wright Company making airplanes. So they were selling Browning machine guns in three main configurations. They had the water-cooled ones like this. This would be the infantry ground configuration. And then they also offered them as air-cooled guns, either set up for tanks or for aircraft. The difference between the two being that an aircraft gun is going to have a higher rate of fire, because that's a thing for aircraft guns. You don't need the high rate of fire for tanks. So in 1924, they redesignate them, give them a new model designation to kind of freshen things up. But fundamentally, this is the Browning model of 1917 that the US Army adopted in World War I. In fact, there are a few differences. There are a few places where it's actually worse than the Army model. There are a few places where it's better. We'll get into that in just a minute. But then in 1931, they do another refresh of the product line, and they start calling this the MG38. Yes, in 1931. They offer it in a wide variety of configurations. You could get a lot of different options. You might want spade grips. We'll show you spade grips in a minute. You could get it with the flash hider if you wanted a flash hider. You could actually get recirculating water systems if you wanted. You could set these up for anti-aircraft use if you wanted that. In fact, this one has a lightened anti-aircraft bolt to increase the rate of fire. All of this was in Colt's effort to sell as many of these guns as they could. They had this capacity. I was going to say they'd put a lot of money into building up this manufacturing capacity, but that all pretty much got paid back to them with US military contracts in World War I. Now it was just a question of how much can we exploit this paid-for existing production line and sell these guns out into the world. So let's take a closer look and let me show you what distinguishes a Colt MG38 from run-of-the-mill model 1917 US machine gun. Let's start by taking a look at the side plate markings. This is the Colt automatic machine gun. That's the commercial name for the thing. It's the model of MG38, and the caliber on this one, as a South American contract gun, is 7.65 millimeter. That would be 7.65 Mauser, aka 7.65 millimeter Argentine. Colt would make these essentially in whatever caliber you wanted. The system is very easy to set up in any full power rifle cartridge that fits the overall length, essentially. So the two most common calibers were 30-06 and 7.65 Argentine, but if you wanted it in 7mm Mauser or 8mm Mauser, or like if the Dutch had come in and wanted them in 6.5 Dutch, or the Swedes had wanted them in 6.5 by 55 Swede, those were all perfectly acceptable, and Colt would have been very happy to sell you guns like that. We then have Browning's patent. It's made by Colt, and the serial number, the C prefix there, is what Colt did to indicate commercial production guns as distinct from military contract guns. Now, this is basically just a World War I model of 1917 machine gun. You have the same setup of rear sight. You have the same charging handle, the same top cover, the same mechanical assembly inside, just with a few subtle details shifted. So right off the bat, you may see that you've got this sort of trigger up here. That is part of how you open the top cover or remove the rear pistol grip. On the 1917 guns, the US military ones, this was spring-loaded. On the Colt commercial guns, you actually have to lift this trigger up to unlock it, and then you can pull this latch back just slightly. It comes back enough to free the top cover. That allows you to open the top cover if you need to load or manipulate the weapon. And then if you want to remove the pistol grip, once the top cover is open, you can push that all the way forward. It no longer holds the pistol grip in place, and we can slide that right out. One of the other differences you'll see here now is this safety. That's the fire position. That's the safe position. This is just a little piece that they added to the backplate that when it's in safe, there, this bar blocks the trigger's ability to go up. In the fire position, it can go up. So safe, fire. Now, if you've disassembled one of the American 1917s, you may be wondering about the recoil spring. On those, and the 1919s, the Browning air-cooled guns as well, you have to actually lock the recoil spring into the bolt before you can disassemble it. One of the improvements that Colt made was to give these self-contained recoil springs, which is a fantastic improvement. So this locks into this little notch in the receiver right there. Way easier to disassemble the gun by having this self-contained. Now this one has a cool little secret hiding inside here. If I pull out the charging handle, and by the way, the charging handle is knurled, specific commercial thing. The bolt in this particular gun has a bunch of speed holes in it. These are actually literally speed holes. This is Colt's version of an anti-aircraft bolt. By drilling these holes, they removed mass from the bolt and increased the rate of fire from about 650 RPM to about 850. This was an option for people who were for customers of Colt's. Colt was happy to offer all sorts of customized options. If you wanted things like this, you could also, for example, get spade grips. Don't like the single pistol grip? You don't like that? You want spade grips on it? Well, they can do that. In fact, when we were setting up this video, a private collector offered to loan us a Colt MG38B with spade grips. So most of the options for these guns didn't involve a new designation, but they did add a B onto the model designation of guns that were sold with spade grips. So this is a 38B. This particular one is a 30 caliber, so that would be 30-06. And I will just take off the spade grips to show you. Same process, lift that up, pull the latch back, open the top cover, push the latch forward, and then the grip assembly just slides right out. So there are your spade grips. The trigger is this guy, and you can see when I push that in, it pushes this down. That impinges on the sear back here, or the trip lever, and that'll fire the gun. We don't have a safety lever down here, like on the single grip, like that guy. Instead, our safety is up here above. So that's the fire position. Flip it across, that's the safe position. And just like on the single grips, all that does is block this lever from going forward. So there it can go, and safe, it's just blocked. All right, getting back to our disassembly here, one subtle element to point out, this is not really important unless you're a person who actually has one of these guns and wants to use it. These notches are large and square. I think there are 16 of them around the periphery of the barrel. These are the timing notches. So the way that you set up a Browning machine gun to shoot is you can actually adjust exactly how far the barrel is threaded into the barrel extension, and this sets your headspace. There's a little spring foot right there with a square tip on it that locks into those notches and prevents the barrel from rotating when you set it. Once you get to World War II, the American model of 1919 air-cooled guns have barrels with smaller rounded notches, and the barrels and the spring feet have to be matched in order to work. You don't want to mismatch them. And most of these spare parts out there are 1919 US military parts, not Colt commercial parts. So something to be aware of if you want to shoot or properly set up one of these. It's also interesting, worthwhile to point out here, that the US military after World War I quickly upgraded their guns to the 1917 A1 pattern, which one of the primary changes was adding a reinforcement bracket or strap here on the bottom of the gun. Colt actually didn't do that on their commercial guns. So you have a 1917 style of receiver setup back here. They did, however, change the fill and drain plugs on the water jacket. So instead of little small plugs, we have these very large screw caps, for one here for filling the water jacket and one on the front for emptying it. Now, I think what they did here was actually make these plugs the same as the parts that they were using on the 50 caliber guns that they were also making, because Colt would quite happily sell you Browning 50 caliber guns as well. And by making them the same, it meant that the accessories that were used on the water jackets were interchangeable between the 30 cal and the 50 cal guns. There aren't a whole lot of those accessories, but you do have things like steam hoses. That's your drain plug. You could fit a steam hose here. The front cap is a large diameter brass one, just like the rear. Colt also made a water circulating system where you could have a big reserve tank set away from the gun and a manual hand crank pump to circulate water through the water jacket. That was something that they designed for anti-aircraft 50 caliber guns, but with these parts built into their commercial 30s, you could mount that system to a 30 caliber gun just the same if you wanted to. And lastly, I mentioned the flash hider. That is the flash hider for this gun. It doesn't actually need it to run. This isn't like a Maxim that has to have the back pressure from the booster. This was an optional accessory. And there actually is one installed on our loaner MG38B, so that's what it looks like when it's installed. Colt's commercial export production of Browning machine guns would last until January of 1942. Not sure what might have happened in December of 41 to force them to switch back to military production, but they did. Between 1919 and January of 42, so 22 years, give or take, they managed to only sell 2,720 water-cooled Brownings like this. That was in a variety of calibers. The majority of them went to South America, but this wasn't a hugely successful product for Colt. You know, this is barely 100 guns per year. They're expensive, but they're not really that expensive. This, I think, would have been a real problem for Colt had they not already paid for the whole production line through World War I military contracts. So, like I said, most of them went to South America. This has a collector's moniker today of being the Argentina 1928 pattern, and for good reason. The bulk of them, the single biggest client for Colt for these was Argentina. In fact, I have some notes here with quantities. 946 of these went to Argentina, 144 went to Paraguay, 256 went to Bolivia, so that's like half the total production right there, just in those three countries. A lot of those guns were in 7.65 Argentine caliber, which was commonly used in South America. They did have other clients as well. 379 of these guns went to the Netherlands, 206 were purchased by China, 216 purchased by Siam, now Thailand. So these are being sold to the countries that don't have a lot of indigenous production of a gun like this. Anyway, and there's similar accounts with the aircraft guns and the tank guns as well. Anyway, big thanks to Morphy's for giving me access to this one to show you, and to the private collector who loaned us the MG38B for me to show you a few of those details. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.